You're listening to For You Dub, By You Dub, a podcast exploring topics and perspectives in health and well-being with experts from across the University of Washington. Brought to you by The Whole You, the University of Washington's holistic wellness and engagement program. Hello and welcome to For You Dub, By You Dub. My name is Anna and I am a program manager for The Whole You and your podcast host. This month is once again UW Yoga Month. It is our 8th year observing Yoga Month in October at the University of Washington. I'm really looking forward to our conversation today about yoga for queer trans liberation and approaching both fitness and well-being equitably. I'm sure, like many of our listeners, I am someone who participates intermittently in yoga classes. I'm very familiar with the mental and physical benefits of yoga, but I am by no means an expert, and there's a lot about yoga and the yoga community that I'm really looking forward to learning more about through today's conversation. Both a guest and co-host for today is my colleague from The Whole You, Diana Ratsamy, who has taught yoga all over the world, and Allé K, a trans activist, educator, and yoga instructor whose classes center folk usually left out of the traditional yoga spaces. Welcome to you both. I'm super excited to have you here. Diana, I would love for you to tell our listeners more about yourself and your background.
Sure. Thank you, Anna. Hello, everyone. My name is Diana Ratsamy, and beyond my role here at The Whole You as a marketing and events specialist, I'm also a yoga teacher and meditation guide. I have been teaching yoga for about 10 years. My practice has taken me all over the world teaching yoga. This has been a practice near and dear to my heart that has been incredibly healing and fulfilling. I've had my relationship with yoga has transformed, changed over the years, especially as yoga has developed and changed in the West. So I am incredibly excited to be having this conversation to dive deep and unpack all of the complex layers of yoga and this practice in our world. I am incredibly excited to have this conversation too with you, LA. I can go ahead and turn things over to you to talk a little bit about yourself and your experience with yoga. Love to pass the mic on over to you, LA.
Thanks, Anna. Hey, everyone. My name is Allé. My pronouns are he, him. I'm currently based on unceded Cherokee land, otherwise known as Asheville, North Carolina. I don't claim to be an Asheville local. I moved here in the pandemic, thanks to the pandemic. I began my yoga teacher journey in DC. I trained with Dharma Yoga in New York City, done the 200 and the 500 hour training there. And I have also, meandered or maneuvered my own identities as I've been a yoga student and a teacher, and kind of come out more openly as queer, and then discovered I was trans through yoga, and I'm also currently living in a fat body. So have a lot of passion for helping folks feel comfortable in yoga spaces who are traditionally left out.
Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. I would love to just kind of start off and have you tell us a little bit more about how yoga has helped you discover yourself and kind of your personal journey with yoga.
Sure. It's so deep, right? Oh my God. Help me heal, help me work through trauma, layers and layers of trauma. I got back from Peace Corps. I worked in Madagascar for 2 years. Peace Corps is a whole other issue. We won't get into it. I got back with some trauma in 2015 to the US. Didn't know what to do with my life. Thought I would be continuing a 3rd year in Madagascar, basically talking about sexual health. And I was like, what is the US? What is bacon cream cheese? And so I just went to yoga every day. I had a lot of anxiety, and I would just get up and start, moving my body. Of course, did the whole yoga with Adrian thing, pulled a muscle because I was not really in an environment that was supportive, living at home with the YouTube. So I've always struggled to personally afford yoga. So I always did these weird, a little scholarship here, a little bit of work in the studio here, a little bit of this and that to be able to afford yoga. But yeah, I basically realized in coming home from Peace Corps that I had been sexually assaulted, and I have a lot of memories that I don't remember, but I kind of remember. And so I worked through talk therapy and yoga to help myself realize like I was safe in my own body, and it took a long time and it's still a practice. But yeah, that's basically how I just started getting addicted to yoga.
Well, thank you for sharing that very intimate and raw story. I find that's many folks their journey into yoga typically is stepping onto the mat in need of some healing or some self-discovery, and it sounds like the practice, your journey, though unique to you and everyone else's, held you in the ways that you needed. So
Yeah,
I think a lot of us, we experience yoga in different ways through our lives or as we age. Maybe you took it as a fitness class, or you went with friends, or got a discount for a class, or tried a free class. And then there's these other layers to yoga, like you're speaking about, that really helped you work through some traumatic and difficult parts of your lives. And they're very different experiences, but it seems like a lot of people at one time or another kind of experience both parts of yoga.
definitely. Like they say, the issues are in the tissues. So, you can only get through so much in a 45-minute talk therapy session. And then you have 23 more hours in a day to sit with yourself, or as I did in my case, was unemployed, like, what do I do in this country that seems foreign, and why do I have electricity? And
the big questions. Yeah. I loved, as you were speaking to your experience, how you spoke to accessibility and the ability to afford or even access these spaces, and that kind of segues into the next question we had. What is the queer yoga experience? What does that look like, and why should we be talking about it?
so near and dear to my heart. I first started teaching queer trans yoga 2 years ago, like almost to the week.
Wow.
Yeah, it's cool. I inherited the
Congratulations.
class from someone else who had been teaching in a group house in DC, just in this cute neighborhood, Mount Pleasant, DC. And it's the first floor of a townhome. They just dedicated it to be a meditation and yoga spiritual space. And so I was able to, just teach classes that were not requiring sign up on MindBody. You don't have to have an account. You don't have to use your dead name to pay unless you use Venmo, but it's very much like literally just show up. We barely had waivers in the beginning. And so it's just a really like down to earth space that felt really important to me. I don't want to be in this hoity toity studio where everyone's wearing like Lululemon and like $95 leggings, because that's just not yoga, and that's not what it needs to be about. So it was like, show up in your old soccer shorts, maybe wear a bra, maybe not, like that old dirty like tank top. It doesn't have to be perfect, the clothing, because that's not what makes the yogi. So for me, it was important that it was donation based or sliding scale. And I always impressed upon people like the importance of redistributing your wealth. So like, if you can pay more, so that the people who can pay less can pay less.
That's a great concept. I love what you're saying about the accessibility and just comfort with it, because we've all been in that space where you walk in. I mean, I remember some of my first yoga classes, I just felt so uncomfortable. Like I'm doing it wrong. I'm not wearing the right thing. I don't know what breath work I should be doing. Should I be breathing louder? Should I, it's this foreign space. It's hard to feel comfortable and welcomed sometimes when you're the newcomer. And I think it's a really important conversation to have about how we're restructuring yoga spaces, specifically through the way you approach your classes. Everyone is welcome really at a base of who you are, which I think is lost. Obviously, there's a lot of ways we could take this conversation, wrapping in capitalism and all that, but at a base, the community is really awesome.
And fortunately, the first yoga class, first yoga studio I ever walked into was owned by a Black gay man. And so I think that the traditional ideas of like what a yoga studio looks like a bunch of thin, cishet, white, able-bodied women, was just not my first experience. And so I'm so grateful, because automatically the vibe of that place was just different. You know what I mean? So I hope that more people can have experiences like that.
Yeah, like speaking to that, the practice itself, at its very core is inviting, but as Anna had spoken to, and as we have all experienced, stepping into these spaces, being primarily, thin, able-bodied, white individuals, there's a sense of othering when you step into them. So it's incredibly important that a space where someone can feel comfortable in their own skin can just come and do the work and do the practice. That then just kind of segues into this beautiful quote that Anna actually pulled from your website. A yoga that doesn't hold social justice at its heart is not a complete or true yoga. And that's a quote by Lakshmi Nair. Could you tell us your relationship with that quote, what that means to you, and how you hold that in your yoga practice and in the way you teach?
Yeah, Lakshmi owns a BIPOC run studio in Colorado. Just throwing that out there. It's a really cool space. I forget the name of it right now. So for me, yoga is a practice. It's a tool for liberation. And one of us is not free until we're all free. So, if we're showing up on our mat and we're showing up and we're just doing the movements, triangle pose, vrikshasana, all these different things, but we're not remembering the purpose of the practice to get to know our true selves and that we are all one and that we need to be in the streets protesting, just like we need to be on the mat doing our self-study, we are not really doing yoga. Like, we have to remember that it's a full practice. It's an 8-limbed practice. And just like in the Bhagavad Gita, how Arjuna had to go to battle even if he didn't want to. We have to sometimes stand up for things even when we're scared, or do things because regardless if we're having any ideas about what it should look like, what things should be, if we're afraid to take action, then we're not doing yoga, right? We can't be so afraid of taking action that we are stuck in inaction.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I love that you brought up, those the sacred yogic texts, the Bhagavad and the 8 limbs, because in the West, yoga has been primarily focused on just the poses, on the asanas, and I'd heard this phrasing of the Westernization of yoga. Practicing just the asanas of yoga is like riding on an airplane with no wings. Right?
You'd fall pretty quick.
So stepping into the greater good of humanity is really what yoga ultimately encompasses and strives for. And we've made this practice into such an individual practice, because this is a nation that prioritizes or lives, adopts individualism.
I love what you said about how the US is a very individualistic society. And I loved in your bio how you said you've taught and I think maybe lived all over the world, because that's a really important understanding of like the greater whole. And I've also lived abroad a bit. And really, the first time I lived abroad, it was just a summer, but it really impacted me in the Dominican Republic. And I saw it was my first time living in a communal society where the greater good is valued more than the individual, which is in sharp contrast to our country in the US. And I was like, wow, people help each other, neighbors help each other. And I learned a lot about like not putting myself first all the time, which is what capitalism supports, which is what white supremacy supports, the cis hetero patriarchy. And so we have to remember that yoga is social justice, because if we're just getting thin and fitting into size 2 Lululemon pants, good for us. So what? How can you sleep at night? So if you're looking to help queer and trans people in yoga spaces or just in the world, I mean, I think that there's just like a lot of education that the general population can do. And one of my favorite ways, obviously you can read a book by by a queer or trans person. You can also watch TV shows, you can watch movies, and just understanding the humanity in each other, I think is what we need to do, because we've gotten
so wrapped up in our own individual experiences, whether it's about how we perceive the pandemic, how it's affecting our livelihood, that we forget that we're all interconnected, that like literally our well-being is tied to mine, to Anna, to Diana. Like we are all only as well as the other is well. We're only as whole as we are together. And it's not just about the individual.
And it's so true that on the other side of that, if I say, my goal is like, oh, I really want to like lose 10 pounds, or I want to get more trim, or these goals that are being derived by these societal standards. Like I want to have the perfect downward dog, or once I achieve that, it doesn't fill me. It doesn't make me feel more full. It's not, at the end of the day, I still wrestle with the same problems. So the yoga I'm being taught is really not meeting the needs and the community and the intention behind yoga, which is really unfortunate. And I'm really glad you both are speaking to that, especially from a teacher's perspective. And for someone who is a student, I'd love to hear your thoughts on how to seek that out as a student, and how to really be more intentional with my yoga practice and finding those spaces, I guess.
I think that if people,
If they have their pronouns in their bio on their website, maybe they're a safe person. If it's in their Zoom name, they're a step ahead. Like just like a little bit of pronoun awareness is like the first step. And if you're looking for people who are, anti-diet, they might have it in their IG bio. They're not going to be promoting cleanses and green juice smoothies and all that in their classes, not tricking you back into your disordered eating.
Right. I wanted to speak to that as well, too. As a student, if you're looking for a deeper connection to communities outside of your own, right? Go to a teacher of color. Go to a teacher. Go to a non-binary teacher. And step into a space, step into that space. They are out there, they're limited, but you can find them. We found you. So
And Diana, I loved what you said about like just taking classes with people who don't look like you or identify like you. Because that's what I'm always telling people to do. I think that's like one of the last slides of my teaching trans-affirming yoga training. If you've taken one class, if you've never taken class, or if you've only taken one class with a BIPOC yoga teacher, take another, or 10 or 20. If you've never taken class with a fat yoga teacher, see how it's different, see how it's the same. And same with trans and queer and neurodivergent and etc.
I think too, especially like for Diana and I, we work for a wellness program that services a really large population. It's, the onus is definitely high up there on us to make sure that we are bringing in different perspectives and all sorts of different types of people as our teachers. And that's another way that we can help contribute to kind of this decolonization, you could say, of yoga, and kind of bringing yoga back to a community and a welcoming space. It's definitely something, I can always improve on in my work. And one of the reasons I was really looking forward to this conversation, I know there's just so much to learn, especially talking about kind of the Western approach to physical fitness and all these assumptions we make about ideal weight, body size. I'd love to talk a little bit more about that. And, I know there's a lot of pitfalls within Western medicine and wellness approaches that really focus there.
I like to use the term straight size. It's basically someone who can find clothing in a store without having to find the plus size section. Or, a lot of stores, what they'll do to discriminate is they won't even carry the size I need in store. It's only available online. Then how do you know what fits and what looks good? It's a whole thing. You lose money on shipping it back in the returns process. Different cultures also have different ideas about ideal body shapes and sizes. Just because someone's skinny doesn't mean they're healthy. And just because someone's fat doesn't mean they're unhealthy. And then if you want to take it a step further, what is health? Who decides what's healthy? I don't even like using that term very much. Healthy. It seems so weighted, so biased. Stresses me out.
It is a challenge, and I I like am so there with you, you know, when you were saying like the word health is a little triggering, because what is health? Even wellness at times
Yeah.
has been like, what is wellness according to this very like myopic Western lens? Wellness apparently means I have to exclude the foods of my people, and I'm just, you know, that's not great for my
Mm.
well-being. And I think at the very heart of what we do really is all about love and connection, radiating love and connection within ourselves and within our community around us.
Trans folks are often told, you know, you need to, well, we're all told this. And there's an extra layer for trans people and for queer people, like you need to fit in these boxes. And if you don't, something's wrong with you. So, you know, trans people literally don't fit in boxes. So for trans people, there's a real risk of disordered eating when you think about not only dysmorphia, but dysphoria. Say you have extra body fat or you're in a larger body, and that often means for people who are AFAB, assigned female at birth, that your boobs are bigger. So then what I did and what other people do is that you then start to fall into patterns of disordered eating to try to make your body smaller, particularly your boobs. So trans and queer folks actually have higher rates of disordered eating because of the added layer of dysphoria. So that's another reason why I think that, you know, trans and queer yoga spaces also need to be anti-diet or, you know, aligned with health at every size, because every extra layer of marginalization, like if you're BIPOC also, that it's just more at risk for harm to be caused. And so if, you know, you're trying to include queer and trans folks or fat folks in yoga spaces or just in your world, I think the greatest place to start is with yourself. It sounds cheesy, but it's how I lead my trans affirming yoga trainings. And I have a new fat affirming yoga training this month. This episode might come out after the training, but I start with social location. And I want people to really focus on themselves and how they present in the world and how they're taking up space, because then you can understand how you're coming into a room and how you can interact with anyone around you. If you're not aware of and owning your white privilege, how can you work to dismantle racism? You can't. You have to understand where you are in the world first. So if you're not aware of your cis privilege, how can you understand the opposite that trans people experience, like marginalization of trans people? You can't if you're not understanding your thin privilege or your straight privilege. And so that's, I think, probably my suggestion. It's a bit vague, but also not.
It goes back to the essence of yoga practice, you know, doing the work within to transform the world outside of you.
For people who maybe haven't done any work, what does that like? How can you do that? What does that look like?
For me, it's the social location stuff. Understanding your privilege and power and your ability to access resources based on the various identities you hold. So if you're not familiar with what social location is, I'll share my social location as an example. I am white, which brings me closer to power. I am trans, which brings me farther away from power. And this is in this systemic way, right? I'm fat, which we know that there's discrimination, stigma against fat people, so it brings me farther away from power. I'm college educated, which brings me closer to resources. And I am queer, which I have, you know, like less access to power than straight people. And I'm somewhat neurodivergent. So I'm like somewhere in between in terms of neurotypical and neurodivergent. And again, a lot of these things are not black and white, right? They're not binaries. They're all like spectrums. More of it is I am physically abled or non-disabled, so I don't face any marginalization in terms of wheelchair use or other things in that category. There's an image by Sylvia Duckworth you can look up on Instagram or online, and there's other people doing the work too about social location. So if you just understand your privilege and where also you might be not, I don't want to say like not privileged, but just like how you're also maybe oppressed. Not that like, if you're not oppressed, I want you to be aware of your oppression, but I just like want you to, sometimes it helps me understand that if I'm not like super financially stable all the time, maybe it's because of like huger systemic things at play than just like my little like faults as a human. Like that's what I mean.
Holding some grace
Not,
for ourselves as we navigate all of this and do that learning. Yeah, that's really important for sure.
Oh, I love that. And to support what you'd said too, it's in doing the work, it's, just get ready to be uncomfortable. And it ain't easy. Holding some grace as you do this work, because the things that will be revealed will just not be nice feeling. Being uncomfortable, having what's it, shame resilience. Shame is one of those things, especially in this world, in this work. Shame is one of those things that will quickly pull you back and put your defenses up and prevent you from seeing that anything is actually wrong. And so just having that, and knowing that at the end of it, doing this work, it's so good for everyone around you, yourself included. As uncomfortable as it is in the moment, you have to look at the greater picture. We're all kind of in that place right now where we have to do the work.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of For You Dub, By You Dub, a podcast produced by The Whole You. You can listen to more episodes and subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or The Whole You YouTube channel. Learn more about episodes, find resources mentioned, and follow our journey at www.wholeu.uw.edu/podcast.